It was my first full-time job, a shipping and receiving gig at a small metal treatment company near Detroit. One of the ladies I worked with, I'll call her Debbie, seemed like a nice lady, and she was helpful as I was struggling to understand the computer system. However, something about her just seemed off. Her mannerisms, personality, and the look in her eyes just made me feel like something wasn't right and gave me a weird feeling. We had a common shared unisex bathroom with one stall in this facility, which was near my workstation. On my second or third week there, I heard what sounded like screaming and objects falling over in there. It was just her in the bathroom, screaming at literally nothing. From that point, I tried my best to avoid her, but she seemed to follow me around as if she knew I was trying to avoid her. I'd head up to the front office to drop off some paperwork or ask management a question, and she'd just be there, standing a few feet behind me and waiting for me to return to the factory floor. I complained to the floor supervisor, and he seemed hesitant, at the least, to do anything about it. I was basically told to just brush it off. One night, I decided to try and find her on Facebook. Not sure why, something just came over me. I didn't find her on any social media, but what I did find made my stomach churn. Dozens of news articles about her. 10 years prior, Debbie picked up her kids from school, claiming they had a doctor's appointment. She gave her 2 children a near-lethal dose of painkillers in their hot chocolate before drinking some herself. From there, she poured gasoline on the floor of her home, which was 10 miles from my shop. Long story short, she ended up pleading insanity and got a reduced sentence, and got out even earlier than that for good behavior. While her kids were falling asleep, she ignited the home. Her kids, who thankfully did not drink enough of the hot chocolate, managed to wake up and discover their home was on fire, and immediately ran to the neighbors, and that neighbor ran in and dragged Debbie out while the firefighters arrived. My heart dropped as I scrolled and saw her mugshot. It wasn't just a case of someone with a similar name. It was her. Her dead eyes stared through my phone screen. I was sick. I had to turn off my phone and go to sleep. Needless to say, it was an awkward couple of weeks at work until I could find another job and get the hell out of there. Back when I was 18 to 19 years old, female, I was house sitting with a girl I was studying with. The family we were house sitting for went to the same church as her, but I didn't really know them well myself. It was more to keep her company in a huge house. This was 1997, when the average teen like me didn't have a cell phone. During the week we were house sitting, it was a short break in the school calendar, which is why this family was away, and why the streets in the area were quieter than usual. My apartment, as well as the house we sat for, was not far from the university. My apartment was actually a 3-minute walk from it, and the house was a further 5 minutes by car. So being a student neighborhood, it was partially quiet this week. The first weird thing that happened the week I was at that house was that I dreamt I was driving through a dark forest on a windy, hilly dirt road, with no lights anywhere except for those from my car headlights. As I started to go down a hill, the headlights suddenly cut out, and everything went dark. The car slowed down to a stop and died. I woke up. In the morning, I went out to my car and it wouldn't start. It had been working perfectly fine the day before. I had to call a guy to come fix it. It was the starter motor. Well, that was the first creepy thing that happened that week. A day or two later, it was Friday. I planned on driving back home to my parents, who lived in a smaller town about 45 minutes away. I packed up my stuff at the big house and was going to head over to my apartment to collect whatever else I needed for the weekend. That trip between the house and my apartment was, as I mentioned, only 5 minutes or so away. Since it was winter, it was dark by the time I left, at around 7 p.m. As I was driving from the house, I noticed in my rearview mirror the headlights of a car behind me, tailing me really close. When I turned, it turned. Back then, I was cautious, but not overly so. Cautious enough to notice in such short distance that something weird was going on behind me. But then when I pulled up to a traffic light, it wasn't there anymore. Relief. Short-lived. The car was now beside me. I looked to my right, and there was a man inside, alone, smiling at me, slightly maniacal. For a moment, I thought, geez, I should really drive with a beanie on at night so people can't see that I'm a petite 5'2" female with long blonde hair down to my waist. I also thought, well, he's in the lane to turn right, so I'm good. I pulled off, and the headlights were behind me again, so close I could barely see them over the back of my car. What an ass, I thought. Who drives like that? Thank goodness my turn is coming up on the left soon. After another minute or two of this tailgating, I slowed down, strategically didn't indicate, and made a sudden sharp left into my driveway, opened the automatic gates, and shot inside. The gates closed behind me. Yay! That drama was over. I gathered a few things from my car to take up with me, and I noticed that on my way over to the stairwell that there was a man at the gate that had just closed behind me. He was still on the other side, and I was at the far end of the parking lot, but I could make out it was the dude from the tailgating car. He was jumping up and down, shaking the gate with absolute rage. Well, I was safely on this side, so I wasn't completely gripped with fear. And besides, there was a group of students making a noise nearby, arriving for a party or something. I headed to the stairs and started going for my basement, ground level to first floor. Rounding the stairs on the first floor, I noticed someone running across the parking lot towards the staircase. In hindsight, I still can't fathom why I didn't put two and two together. I guess it's because I subconsciously knew that there was a group being let in through the pedestrian gate. As I was rounding the staircase between the second and third floors, someone suddenly touched me. I spun around. The guy. He had slipped in as part of the small crowd. He said something. I said something sassy back and told him to F off. Then I turned my back on him to continue up the stairs. I lived on the third and last floor. He grabbed me from behind, held my back against his chest with his left arm around my neck. I felt something being held against my right side. Oh crap, a knife. He led me down. I remember thinking that the light was broken on the bottom level. This can't end well, but I was calm. I resisted slightly. He tightened his grip. I felt like I wasn't getting enough oxygen. I started to become a dead weight. He started to drop me. I was groin level. I elbowed. It connected. He dropped me, but spun around to face me, ripped the front of my button-down top. Then he stopped. He looked at someone behind me, someone taller than him. His eyes went wide. He turned and ran. I screamed. Then I too turned around to see who had come to help. There was no one there, but people came out of their apartments after that. The police were called. This was the second time that they were there that night. What? Turns out the other weird thing that happened was that my dad had already called the police, and they had come past an hour before. My mom had a weird feeling all evening and had hassled my dad endlessly that something bad was going to happen to me. She had been right. As it turned out, they caught the guy. I identified him in a lineup. He was a serial rapist in the area. He was accused of raping something like 14 women. One had thrown herself out the first floor of her apartment to get away from him, and broken her leg. Weeks later, the police called me. Before his trial, his cell door had been left open. He was gone. Apparently, an inside job. Back when I was about 16 years old, because of my living situation, at least twice a month I'd have to make a 2-hour drive from a city area back to my parents' house in a rural area. I'd say about an hour and a half of that drive was just country road, with nothing but valley, corn, or some other crop on either side, with the occasional farmhouse or something that you think people might go in and out of willingly along the way. Because of how used to this drive I'd already been beforehand, I didn't think much of driving that long stretch of no cell phone service, no phone booth area. Nothing had happened yet, so surely nothing would happen ever, right? In the middle of one of those drives back, while the night was slowly taking over as I was driving, I saw a flash of light. That was weird. Maybe just a momentary anemic moment. Another flash. Well, maybe someone coming this way has their high beams wonky or something. Another flash. All right, something's wrong. I slow down a bit as to not get blinded periodically and swerve off the road and try to figure out what was ahead. Further in the distance, I think I see a person. Actually, multiple. My eyesight's well and good at this time in my life, so I was putting 2 and 2 together, getting close enough to realize there were 4 people on this shitty country road, line up across it as if to make a roadblock to prevent any cars from passing through. Another note is that I don't see any cars around them that they could have come in. I don't remember any farmhouses or sheds nearby either. The rest of this encounter felt like it took place in the span of an hour because of my anxiety, but it was likely no more than 5 minutes, in hindsight. I'm driving maybe 10 miles per hour now as I'm getting closer and realizing that I'm definitely without a doubt approaching a line of 4 grown-ass people with huge bright white masks on, staring in my direction. 2 of them definitely have bats or some other distinctly long, blunt objects, and one person is holding something that the flashes are coming from. I've seen enough horror movies and heard enough stories about crimes on roads like this that I thought I was somehow impervious to think that in that moment I only have 2 options: slow down and hope that they eventually part way around my car, running the risk that they could very well get the jump on me and my dinky car, or pick up the pace and disregard whether or not they'll have the chance to move out of the way when I potentially accelerate through them. I decided the latter. I had no means to protect myself other than a bat in the trunk of my own car, and at the time, I was a young teen who passed as a girl who could easily get knocked down with a solid slap because of my build, and my car was shit enough to where if I stopped, I wouldn't doubt someone could break in with easy force. Now hearing gravel and dirt kick up from under my tires, I was more freaked out at the potential that I could drive myself off the road, along with taking out some strangers, who I am now dead certain are carrying bats, as I accelerate towards them. I'm proper freaking out, but I've accepted that this was a decision I made from the adrenaline of fear of any situation. I accelerated more, and thankfully, the 2 that were directly in my way lunged out of the way, just in time to not get hit. I stopped accelerating to catch my breath, as if I needed to, and see them in my rearview mirror. The other 2, for some reason, trying to haul ass towards my car, as if they could catch up, and it became so real in that moment that there were 2 people who were intentionally trying to get the jump on me in the middle of fucking nowhere. Probably not just shit kids trying to get the kicks and giggles out of freaking someone out, but real adults trying to harm someone that came that way. I just focused on driving out of there as fast as I could. I focused on going forward, didn't turn the radio back on to distract me, and felt shook by the experience in general. The most fucked up part, honestly, was getting home and realizing that part of what I was driving on wasn't gravel. It was nails that were now embedded into my tires. Praise whatever God may be out there, or more likely, my own saved up money, for me somehow having those sturdy-ass tires. I didn't tell my parents the full story about what happened, and they just assumed I was being reckless and someone was just playing a prank with just scattering some nails about randomly on the road. I told the story to some of my friends, and they told me I probably wasn't in any serious situation, and they were just trying to get a scare out of me, especially since being in a car was a pretty big advantage in the situation, which I can't deny. Still, creeped the absolute hell out of me, and I remember it every single time I drive down a road that looks any type of similar. This is something that I add to the end of this story after having told it to friends beforehand, but this happened before the Purge movie came out. Otherwise, I would have definitely felt more comfortable saying it wasn't creepy and just annoying and bothersome. I still wonder where they came from, since I very clearly remember there not being a car anywhere close by, nor any buildings around. But I guess I could have been wrong. Made a note of it every time I drove it in the daylight. I know this was mostly in a car, but because of the proximity and near intimate relation between my car and an external human's body, it definitely felt like a personal creepy encounter, and I'll stand by that much. At least also given the potential of direct one-on-one human interaction, should I have slowed down enough. Had to tell this one to someone other than my friends, since they mostly heard the story, and I only just had a nightmare about it again a day ago, and I still don't know if I'm overreacting about the situation. All I know for sure is that those were definitely people, and I was definitely afraid. Edit. For clarity on the Purge movie mention, I had separate folks I've told this story to mention that there had been some incidents they'd known of shortly after that movie came out, of people scaring the absolute hell out of others using similar masks and being generally menacing, capitalizing off of people being scared, because they were reminded by that movie that some people would kill for fun, given the opportunity. The folks that mentioned it would say that it'd be another reason to believe that it was a real mean-spirited trick, or prank, or whatever, to play on a stranger.